flood zone. And I found that it took up 12% of the city. With the 0.2% chance annual flood zone, it was nearly identical at 13%, just a slight bit bigger. For step 5, I wanted to identify the islands within the flood zones. These are areas that are safe but are likely inaccessible during flooding. So these have been highlighted in red, and again, this uses the same color terminology as step 4, where purple is for the 1% chance annually, and the green is for the 0.2% chance annually. There is a slight difference in islands. I think most notable is that with the more severe flooding of the 0.2% chance, you lose the number of islands, but you get some larger islands appearing. In step 6, I needed to determine the unsuitable shelter locations. These are areas that are either within the flood zone or within my buffer. Now, my buffer is the main assumption of my project. I made the assumption that if FEMA's National Flood Hazard Layer showcases the full extent of flooding for an area, and it didn't spread any farther than what is shown, it would be suitable to shelter approximately 2 football fields away from the actual flood zone. Now, I have the CRS in my project set to meters, and I use meters, so it's not quite 2 football fields, it's 200 meters, but it's very close. And I felt that if I was in a flood zone and I knew the water wasn't going to spread any farther, I would be comfortable being 2 football fields lengths away from the floodwaters. So in this slide, I am showcasing in the top left the buffers I created. Again, using the same color terminology, purple for 1%, green for 0.2%. These are very similar buffer zones. They do not change that much. Very minor differences. So that's the top 2 left images are just the buffer zones. The top 2 right images include the buffer zones as well as any symbols that represent possible shelter locations. So that is churches, schools and universities, and hotels. The bottom left 2 images then showcase the possible shelter locations that I had marked as unsuitable. So the bottom left image shows the full range of marked locations that were unsuitable, and the slightly zoomed in image to the right of it is to more easily be able to see what the unsuitable locations look like. That is similar for the bottom, the 2 bottom left images. This is for the 0.2% chance, again with the full extent and then the zoomed in side by side. And then for step 7, I wanted to give a recommendation of suitable shelter locations. And I marked these with a green sort of shield background. Mostly because I had trouble finding a check mark, and I also didn't know if a check mark would show up as easy. So I figured a green circle behind it with a white border to help kind of give it some contrast from the unfortunately similar 0.2% chance buffer zone. It would help to identify them. So the top two large images on this slide showcase all possible shelter locations that are not in the flood zone and are also not within the 200-meter buffer. There are a lot of options, but I think for this small town, it would be best to pick the Ray County High School, the Holiday Inn Express, or Bryan College. The reason I picked these is because the high school and the college should be fairly large buildings with decent capacity, so that those who are affected can be sent here for shelter and food and whatever else. Especially at the college and the school, they are likely to have cafeterias, so it could be easier to prepare food. The Holiday Inn, I also thought might be a fairly large location to shelter at, although it might be harder to get a hotel to allow mass sheltering of those affected during a flood. I'm not really sure what organizations would take people in. The Holiday Inn might be less likely than the college or the high school. So, my project solution for my project question, which was what locations would be best, or what locations are available for emergency services to choose. And so, as noted on the previous slide, while any of the possible shelter locations that are marked with a green background would be suitable for shelter, I would recommend that emergency services select Bryan College, Ray County High School, and or the Holiday Inn Express. Depending on the amount of people affected, they may need to use all three, or they may only select some. I'm not sure. I don't have that data to be able to quantify. But I would pick those three locations due to their large size and distance from the flood zones. And the images on the right are different screenshots that I took of the shelter zones that I would recommend. Thank you for viewing my presentation.